Hello everyone, it's Monday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Last Tuesday, President Yoon Suk Yeol vetoed a revision to the law requiring the government to purchase surplus rice. It was the first veto by a South Korean president in 7 years. Now, the National Assembly needs to reconsider the bill through a secret ballot this coming Thursday. The bill had been passed unilaterally by the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea in late March, and the DP strongly criticized President Yoon for rejecting it. What is this revision to the Grain Management Act about? And what are different views of the ruling and main opposition parties? For an in-depth analysis, we welcome Professor Song Sye-ryun at Kyung University Law School. Professor Song, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And we also have Tae-yoon, Associate Professor at Graduate School of International Agricultural Technology at Seoul National University. Professor Kim, it's really good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, first question to our Professor Song. President Yoon Suk Yeol last Tuesday rejected an amendment to the Grain Management Act, marking the very first veto of a bill since he took office and the very first such veto by a president in 7 years. Now, before looking at what the next step might be, first, what is this amendment to the bill about?
Right. As you said, the proposed amendment is to the Grain Management Act, which is aimed at securing stable food supplies through government intervention to smooth out the supply and demand management. A bit of background is that Koreans are eating less rice. Per capita basis, we eat half of what people used to eat in the early 1990s. So I guess we eat pizza, hamburgers, and whatnot. So there's a chronic overproduction of the rice. And under the original Grain Management Act, the government may purchase excess production over a demand at a negotiated price. So under the program, the government has been buying and storing excess rice in the tune of 550 billion won annually. The amendment says if there's an overproduction, it's between 3 to 5%, or the rice price drops between 5 to 8%, the government is obligated, which says must buy, the entirety of the excess amount at a market price rather than the negotiated price. So the government is being a guaranteed buyer in this case. So government projects it might increase the budget to 1.4 trillion won in 2030 if the bill passes, which is about 3 times the budget that they allow this time. Why? Because government is saying that it creates a market distortion and the farmers will be incentivized to produce even more rice as there's a guaranteed buyer.
Right, so the amendment is obligating the government to buy the surplus rice. Now, Professor Kim, regarding this contentious bill, the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition party appeared deeply divided. Now, what are the main arguments from each party?
Basically what the ruling party says, this kind of buying leftover, like it can be, then in case it can be burden for our government budget. Also overall, it can continue to our overproduction of the rice, which eventually reduce our rice competitiveness in the world market. So that's what our ruling party emphasize. For the opposition party, where they emphasize our food self-sufficiency rate. Currently, probably food self-sufficient rate would be around 45%. I think also if we consider the forage or animal food, the grain self-sufficiency would be probably 20%, which is the lowest among OECD member countries. So, the rice is very important crop in our society. And if there is a food crisis in the world, if our rice production reduces, then probably it's very hard to get access to rice with the appropriate amount at that time. So in that case, it can be our crisis in our society. So that's why our opposition party emphasized to have this bill. It's what I know.
See. Good. Professor Song, as the revised Grain Management Act got vetoed by the president, the bill is back in the National Assembly's court once again for reconsideration. Now, I wonder, what are the rules related to this?
Yeah, as a separation of power scheme dictates that if it goes back to the National Assembly, overcoming the veto to pass it will require 2/3 vote of the president. Now, It's the out of 299 members at this point, but ruling PP party has more than 1/3 at this point, since they have 115 as it stands. So voting along the party line will probably knock out the bill.
Right, I see. So like our Professor Song said, the bill is largely expected to be rejected as members of the ruling PPP, most of whom oppose the revision, make up more than 1/3 of the current assembly. But it does look like the issue of how to deal with the surplus rice needs to be tackled. So before we go into possible countermeasures, what's behind the overproduction of rice, Professor Kim?
Like our rice production is also declining. Also, the rice consumption is declining very rapidly, which can be like a main reason for the overproduction or price decline. Our rice overproduction, we mainly the change in dietary patterns. Recently, the people consume less rice and more meat or wheat, something. So currently, our per capita consumption, like in 2011, current years probably 56.9 kilograms, but back in 2011, almost 71.2 kilograms, almost 20% decrease in consumption. On the other side, our rice cultivations also decreased by 14%, I guess, and also our production reduced only 8%. So our overall production reduced, but still our consumption reduced much larger than our production. That's why currently we are suffering from like overproduction of the rice. But if our rice produced in this kind of productivity, at average year's productivity is probably like 521 kilograms per 10 hour, then probably currently our excess production will be about 200,000 tons per year. So that's what we are now suffering from.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Kim, this overproduction of rice inevitably, results in the drop in the price of the rice. So how significant was the drop in the price of rice, and how is this impacting local farmers?
Like when you look at the data of the price decline, like compared to almost 10 years ago, so last year, our price declined almost 9.5%. But due to the price decrease, our farm income reduced like in 10 hours, 1.2 million won last year, but recently reduced almost 120,000 won. So almost a 9.5% decrease in our rice income. But overall, in terms of the profit, like we have the revenue and cost. If we consider net profit of the farmers, like a net revenue minus cost, then the net profit reduced almost 36.8% last year, which is huge. So when we have the price decrease in our market, then farmers' income reduced a lot due to the cost of the rice. So it's damaging to farmers' well-being.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Kim, I'd like to look into the issue a bit in a more broader sense by tapping on the food self-sufficiency rate. The food self-sufficiency rate of South Korea is only 44.4% as of 2021, as you have already pointed out, the lowest among OECD member countries. And except for rice, which is around 84%, the self-sufficiency ratio for wheat and corn remains at just around 1%. Why is the ratio so low? And because of this, watchers are saying that we need to at least protect the self-sufficiency rate for rice. What is your takeaway on this?
Well, for the rice, because our government policy, we have been support the rice more than 50 years, I guess. So our rice production is almost protected. But in 2014, we liberalized our rice market so that our rice production will be, our self-sufficiency will be reduced a little bit, but still very high. But for the other crops, like wheat or corn, it's very hard to produce those wheat and corn compared to imported one, which means if you are farmers, if you produce wheat or corn, then it's very hard to have the profit compared to imported one. But still, since we blocked our rice market, still our rice is okay to the farmers. So overall, if you consider the self-sufficiency rate, the low self-sufficiency rate, it's because of the low profit for that crop. And recently our wheat consumption increased. So people say, hey, why don't you grow wheat? But still, in order to produce wheat in our market, farmers produce wheat first, and then probably there should be a wheat processing center nearby. But mostly wheat processing center is not available nearby, so transportation cost is a lot. But for the rice, where there are so many rice processing centers near rural areas, so it's very easy to process the rice. It means it's good for farmers in terms of the market ability, but for the wheat, it's very difficult. So overall, it's very important to maintain the food self-sufficiency, including the rice, I guess.
Right, I see. Thank you for the explanation, Professor Kim. Now, Professor Song, to stabilize rice prices, the Agriculture Ministry came up with a variety of measures on last Thursday, that is. Could you briefly tell us what they were?
Right, as Professor Kim was saying, the food security does not only concern rice. Rice production is more convenient at this point, so farmers are leaning towards that direction. The ministry does have a comprehensive measures if they can get those programs through. For example, they have a price stabilization through reducing supply of rice, and they're pushing the idea that the rice flour would diversify food offerings and raise the consumption. And they want to diversify from the rice production entirely and giving more chances and subsidies to like the wheat and bean and those products that we depend on heavily on imports. And they're also talking about supplying more labor from migrant workers and domestic workers using seasonal work program and bringing in city people to farming. Now also they're talking about the streamlining of logistics and using technology like the smartphones and in effect cutting the middleman so that the more revenue could go to directly the farmers rather than the middleman. And also they're talking about innovating farming as a future industry and bringing young people and the technology, including the green bio industry and the advanced farming industry. So those taken together seems like a pretty good direction if we can put those things to effect, because not only the rice is the crucial part, but also as our diet and our needs, agricultural needs have been diversified, we have to meet those demands and meet those needs going forward.
Right, I see. So many countermeasures seemingly in a good direction have been drawn by the government. Now, Professor Kim, let's dig deeper into some of those measures. One is to offer subsidies to farmers when they cultivate other kinds of crops, such as beans, while cutting rice output. Especially, the ministry aims to replace 10% of imported flour with locally sourced rice flour by 2027, offering subsidies when cultivating other crops. How effective would this be?
Well, it depends on the degree of the subsidy. I mean, if the government provides huge amount of subsidies to farmers, then probably farmers can accept it, and then they can change, like from rice to other crops. But if the subsidy is not so enough, then probably they are not changing. You know, the farmers are mostly risk averse. They are very reluctant to change their behavior. So overall, also the rice farm is very easy. You know, there are a lot of the mechanization is quite good. So farmers can easily grow the rice. If there is no enough subsidy, then it's very difficult, I guess. And also the impact, where we have the public direct payment for the rice farmers, also the government have another direct payment system for stressed crops like wheat, corn or soybean. So if the government put the stressed crops a lot, then they might provide the direct payment again. So that system should be in line with the rice subsidy. And also, recently, the government also emphasized the production adjustment system, which can be also good tool to compensate the direct payment system. So this can be, if that both system is working, then probably it will be great.
Right, I see. So the enough amount of subsidy and the way of payment would be very important. Now, Professor Kim, other measures include pushing for increasing the number of people working in the agriculture sector, both Koreans and non-Koreans, and of course, supporting smart farms as well. How would such measures help to stabilize rice prices and furthermore increase the food self-sufficiency that we had talked about?
Okay. In agriculture, there is the seasonal labor workers, foreign labor workers. Mostly we import our laborers from some of Southeast Asian countries. Of course, the foreign labor workers is temporarily, I guess, helpful for our rice farmers, especially during the harvesting season. But I don't think it's sustainable. Like our farmers should harvest themselves by using machine. Mostly the foreign workers, they are engaged in a little bit profitable crops like vegetable, food and vegetable. So in terms of the rice sectors, I don't think the foreign labor force has big impact. In terms of the smart farm that you mentioned, the facility is quite expensive. Like in previously we call vinyl house or something, that also cost a lot, probably for a half hectare, they're more than 300 million won for one vinyl house. So it costs a lot. If you establish a smart farm, especially in the rice field, then it costs more than that, I guess. So also there are a lack of the technology to add those smart farms. So farmers very not so rich, so it's very hard for them to invest their smart farm. Those technologies can be a little bit helpful for the farmers, but it's not the sustainable way, I think.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Song, are there any countries that have introduced food security-related laws to promote self-sufficiency that South Korea could refer to?
Well, it's not just a situation for South Korea. So plenty of countries are using some sort of measures for food security. For example, European Union has a common agriculture policy that supports agricultural producers. United States has a farm bill. Japan has a basic law on food, agriculture in rural areas. China has a food security laws, and so on and so forth. Now, these kind of laws have similar aims and diversifying and securing that if there's an emergency, we have enough food. But one of the things that this government is saying, and also has been a perennial concern, is that the WTO has a rule that the market distorting subsidies or programs should be dissuaded. Korea has been on a watch list on that. So I think the new program or any kind of program should adhere to their rule. Now, the WTO has been greatly weakened these days, so probably the impact is pretty small in a short run. But in the longer run, probably we have to keep in mind that there is a global trade rules that we have to abide by. But another thing is that if the program is just a cash payment to make the very politically sensitive sector, meaning the farming sector, to be either quiet or be compliant, probably it is also short-sighted as well. I think that there should be a innovation and should be a new direction for the farming as a whole. But we have to strike a careful balance in those new directions, but at the same time, those are farming sector that is probably populated by, very aging population at this point. So I think that it's not just one step or two steps behind, but this government, like anything others, it has to strike a pretty smart and careful balance.
Right, I cannot agree more. Now, since we are running out of time, I believe this would be our last question. But Professor Kim, what more can be done to improve South Korea's self-sufficiency ratio in grain and to tackle the issue of overproduction of rice? And I mean, what should the government take into consideration when coming up with additional measures?
Okay, I'd like to emphasize three things first. Like information and market research, and also market functioning, and the government policy. First of all, the farmers are mostly reluctant to change their behavior. So you should understand the farmers are risk averse. So if you do not provide a lot of incentive to the farmers, they are not changing. Recently, there's young farmers still they are tackling some issues, but they are lack of experience. So you should work with the farmers to do something, right? So first of all, the information is very important, I think. We have the correct information of the production and consumption and some import data for each area so that the researchers can conduct their, some simulations based on the research or some forecasting. So basically, information is very important. And the second, market function is very important. In the market, the price system is not. There are sometimes the price is so fluctuate in agricultural sector. In that case, the farmers are very get high risk of the producing that rice. So if the market price is stable, then probably farmers' income will be stable. So market system should be enhanced in order to stabilize the food sufficiency issues. And the last, the government policy. Like recently, we have the direct payment for the rice. But we also currently focusing on other crops, not the rice, like soybean or corn or wheat. And the government they do not know the rice is producing almost 47% of our land. So rice is the big crop, one crop, but the government cannot focus on only rice. Like they should focus on other crop, including farmers' income. If they emphasize the overall farmers' income, then probably it will be great. So it will promote the supply of, the supply of the food and stabilization of the rice price and income, and to spread the public benefit functions of the rice farming. That's all I suggest.
Right, I see. I hope proper measures could be implemented in a way our experts advise so that we can better tackle this situation. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition, but thank you, Professor Song and Professor Kim, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, this is all for Within the Frame tonight. We will be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching and goodbye.